Good morning and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I am joined this morning by Andrew Wilson from All Under One Banner and by Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. So welcome both of you.
Good afternoon.
This week has been a momentous week in Westminster politics. We had the Supreme Court ruling earlier in the week and then Parliament returning to attempt to hold Boris Johnson to account for the unlawful proroguing of Parliament and for, well, everything else he's trying to achieve right now. The tone of the debate was fairly harsh. We saw the Prime Minister saying humbug to one MP worried about death threats that she's received. And we also saw him take the rather charming angle of saying that the best way to honour Joe Cox's memory would be to get Brexit done, which I think her family, her friends, virtually everybody with a conscience kind of went, that's a bit off, Boris. So what do you think of how things have been in Parliament this week? Do we feel that we're any further forward now that Parliament is back?
Well, for my mind, I think it was totally unforgivable for Boris to use that kind of language. It's indicative of in which way that he's trying to take the party. He's no longer going with the strong and stable. He's more going with the iron fist, like it and lump it, kind of like scenario. And I think it was deeply disrespectful to Joe Cox and her memory. They've actually got a sign up on the wall that says more in common, and that was what it was pretty much what Joe was all about. We've got far more in common than what divides us. So I think it was deeply disrespectful. I didn't expect anything else from Boris, to be honest with you. He's a person that obviously finds it hard to apologise and say that he got it wrong. It's as I say, it's just indicative of the way that this government has been currently run.
What's your reaction to seeing Parliament this week?
I think certainly there's an indication that the Prime Minister is playing to his base in a kind of Trump style, and that means that his language and behaviour is likely to become more and more extreme and unparliamentary and unpleasant as the temperature continues to rise in Westminster. I think there have been occasions in the past where actions and language in the House of Commons has been very strong. You can think of political situations under Mrs Thatcher and going back further than that. However, I would distinguish that I completely agree the use of Joe Cox and the use of Joe Cox at all in these circumstances and her memory, it was completely outrageous. And I think it is an indication that with this Prime Minister he will say and do anything to increase his base in an attempt to protect the hardliners, in an attempt to retain the hardliners in his party as the temperature in Westminster rises.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you talk about him speaking to his base. How big do you think that base is now? The kind of people who hear that kind of violent language, the military metaphors, they're talking about the Ben Bill as the Surrender Act and things like that. Do you think there are more people who hear that and go, yes, Boris, strong leader, than there are people who hear that and go, maybe we need to think about doing something different?
I think there are certainly voters who were impressed by things written on the side of a big red bus, and who remain impressed by, as you say, strong combative language, and maybe don't consider the implications both short and long term. As to the size of that base, on the one hand, the Brexit Party appear to be continuing a successful campaign at the moment from what we can see. I think it's also worthy of note that, as I understand it, their one attempted meeting in Scotland has now been cancelled, and so as part of a Brexit movement, there appears to be quite a firm border drawn along the border that there is no particular interest in either what the Brexit Party is or what the Brexit Party stands for in Scotland, and that doesn't come as a surprise.
So, Chris, what's your feeling about that movement, this kind of shift in language? We saw some statistics I was looking at just before we came on air, that 2 years ago there were under 200 threats recorded against MPs. Mm-hmm. Last year it was about 240, and this year so far we're up to just under 240. I think it was 238. Mm-hmm. So these threats against MPs, that this is police statistics, so this is things that have had some police involvement, have been rising consistently over the last few years. What do you make of that as a development in our politics?
Well, it's consistent with how, I personally perceive, this may not be everyone else's view on it, but the right-wing narrative that the Brexit Party champion, it does appeal to your archipelago Brexit voter. That chap that you may come across in the beaches of Tenerife, that with the Union Jack shorts and oi for England, but doesn't understand that he's in a foreign country, and when you go to a foreign country you tend to give yourself over to the ways and customs. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously I'm not depicting England as a foreign country, but when I like to go down to England, I like to go out for a nice roast dinner, and I like the custom of going to the pub all day, with the family and the extended family, and not get completely off your trolley. Whereas
that's not very Scottish.
No, it's not very Scottish. But these are nice sort of like quirks that Scottish people can appreciate when they go across the border. Going back to that typical sort of like unionist on holiday in Tenerife, he would much rather seek out fish and chips than go for a paella. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And it's this kind of like it's more of a kind of like a World War mantra, mm-hmm. Of British Bulldog, and Britain can do this and Britain can do that. Quite frankly, Britain can shove it up their jacksie for, as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's very telling that the kind of characterising people, those who would express that kind of Dunkirk spirit, none of them were involved in Dunkirk. None of them were close to Dunkirk, and also they completely misrepresent that the Allied forces during the Second World War were drawn from all corners of the globe.
Correct, yes.
An Indian army of more than 1 million soldiers, for example, and Australians and Canadians and French and Czechs and Poles. All for it was not an enterprise led only from the southeast of England.
Yeah. However, they will claim it that way.
Absolutely.
And it's also born out of stories that have been handed down from over the years that have been embellished. Mm-hmm. The idea that the empire was all encompassing, and this is what Boris wants to get back to. The idea of empire, the idea that Britain can do no wrong, where quite clearly, when the empire was in full swing, there were far many more atrocities committed by the empire in the name of, rule Britannia than there was anything else. So I think he needs to be very careful to that, because it is playing to that angry mob And we've all seen them out in College Green, when MPs are being interviewed. You have that us and them mentality now, which is not so prevalent in Scotland, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But when you're watching, when abuse is getting thrown on both sides, mm-hmm. You're neither a Remainer nor a Leaver MP wise, but you're still painted as a traitor, yes. Which is a horrendous description to call anyone, because we have to remember, I said off air that the MPs, and I was predominantly talking about the SNP MPs, but it has to be said for every MP that you have to be a great strong character to withstand all this embattlement that is being heaped upon your shoulders. Personally, if I was at Westminster, I think I'd be sitting in the corner like a gibbering wreck.
Yeah, well, we've heard several MPs talking about just how stressful an experience it is, even at the best of times, these kind of very late night debates, the stress of even just going through a vote at Westminster. I remember one MP talking about how claustrophobic it is mm-hmm. to be in the lobbies, quite often with people that you don't necessarily get on very well with. And I know a number of women MPs have said that there's some unpleasantness when you get into that kind of crowded space.
It may actually explain why Michael Gove was propping up the Speaker's chair, allegedly high on ketamine.
We couldn't possibly comment on that.
I said allegedly, Kenny.
But there is a just generally a very stressful experience about being an MP, and I think, as we say, with this increase in threats, particularly against women, particularly against women from ethnic minorities, mm-hmm. And most especially, it generally tends to be Diane Abbott. Yeah. But there, all of this, along with the fact that it seems very difficult to get anything done. What impact do you think that kind of stress has on first of all our governance, and secondly on us, if our government and our politicians just can't actually work properly because they're going nuts?
Well, I personally don't know. Any time I come across any of our MPs, obviously I'm in close contact with Chris Stevens, being on the trade union group, and any time I see Chris, he always looks, like any more laid back, he'd fall over. I don't know. I honestly don't know how he copes with it. Obviously, he adds to it by going up to Firhill to watch Partick Thistle as well. So that must bring on, the occasional palpitation.
Maybe years of being a Partick Thistle fan kind of makes you immune
to any other a wee bit, yeah. But no, I was watching Chris Law when he was discussing the arms sales and directly holding the Tory government to account, and he was so calm and measured, and never lost his cool once, and delivered all the facts and figures, with complete precision, and it just that actually makes you, when the speaker is constantly pointing out that we need to watch the language, people are tuning in and all the rest of it. But people are also tuning in as well, obviously with their own interests, i.e. SNP MPs or even Tory MPs, but actual constituents watching, not the chaos and mayhem, but they're actually watching their own MP, or, unfortunately, I don't like to watch my own MP because he's an absolute embarrassment. But you're looking for professionalism, and I biased. You get oodles of professionalism from the Scottish MPs. I don't think that they've ever openly engaged in, a sort of like this open slacking match that is going on. But in order to fix it, looking at it, the only way, and obviously speaking as a socialist, I'd be quite, I wouldn't be that bothered if Jeremy Corbyn did take over as a sort of like a caretaker prime minister and stuff like that. Nicola has admitted that it would be her least worst option, and it's probably somebody that she could work with. But I can't for the life of me understand. Well, I can. Jo Swinson's opposition to that, because she's clearly angling to try and get herself back in, ingratiated with the Tory party again, because it's the only way that the Lib Dems would ever be able to, be standing at the dispatch box. But it needs a bit of consensus. She needs to come down. She needs to think about what is best. I hate using this, what is best for the country, but to be honest with you, the best for the country is for, obviously, everybody to get round and deliver that vote of no confidence, and then move on from there. Do you know what I mean? I think that they're overshooting the mark by trying to pick a leader beforehand.
Of course. I think the impact on politicians as well, without generalising, I think it's fair to say that people who pursue political careers do that for positive reasons. They want to make a difference in some direction or another, and I think it must be very frustrating in a current circumstances where we almost have a single issue parliament, notwithstanding, for example, raising important matters such as allegedly illegal arms sales to the Saudi Arabian government.
Oh no, there was nothing allegedly about it. They definitely done it 3 times.
So the frustration on the part of politicians that they are unable to address anything else of importance because the Parliament is so absolutely mired and stuck, because there was no plan for Brexit when they started, and there's still no plan for Brexit, and the current constitutional challenges and crises are as a result of there being no plan. And I think politicians on all sides, apart from those who are determined to follow a no plan agenda, I think they would find it frustrating and defeat it. It will take tremendous self-resilience and strength to continue working day to day when all the energy and all the focus is being, and all the air in the room is being drawn out by the continued absence of any plan as to how to resolve the current Brexit crisis.
Now, the SNP have suggested one way of helping to, or at least getting to a point where a resolution can be found. They've said they'll call for a vote of no confidence this week, and they are looking to install an interim government. They're not looking to get an election right away, because that would take us past the 31st of October. Do you think there's much chance of that actually happening? First of all, the vote of no confidence, do you think that would pass? And secondly, do you think there is an interim government that can be cobbled together?
Well, I think I'd take a little step back in time for a moment in looking at that. I think one analysis of the lack of success of Theresa May's administration was a lack of doing effective politics. There was not consensus building. There was not effective communication, whatever that would be. There wasn't a bringing together of a group, of a majority in support of one position or another. It was simplistic messaging directed not particularly well. And certainly, I think it demonstrated that it didn't coalesce or group together, for example, members of the Tory party. So I worry a little bit that those political skills either have been lost or are not as important in the current heated environment. But if political skills could be deployed to build a consensus behind a vote of no confidence, and that I think in UK politics perhaps there wasn't the tradition of that you might see in other European countries where proportional representation has been the electoral norm for much longer, and that requires what I was describing as political skills in terms of building consensus and building support. So if there can be a building of support behind a vote of no confidence and a group of 30 plus SNP MPs as a starting point, then if that consensus could be built, then yes, I think it would stand a reasonable chance. I think in the context of the way in which the febrile nature of our current politics and the absence of plans, I would certainly give you odds that a vote of no confidence will come forward in the next week or two, especially considering the pressure and the determination to protect against the threat of a no deal exit on the 31st of October.
Now we have seen some barriers that are going to need to be overcome there. For example, Jo Swinson, leader of the Lib Dems, has said that she would not countenance anything that would put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. And it seems unlikely. It seems difficult to imagine what coalition could be formed from the opposition benches now that wouldn't have the Labour leader as a central figure in it. What's your feeling about that? Do you imagine that Swinson will eventually bend on the basis that they need to do whatever it takes to stop Brexit or to stop a no deal, or do you think that the Labour Party will eventually say, well, we'll figure out something else?
Well, I suppose as a matter of the straight constitution, the leader of the opposition is given by convention, if conventions still matter, is given the next opportunity to form a government. That we go into a period of 14 days under the Fixed Term Parliament Act, I think, in order to then reach a consensus and reach in theory, a government, a national government. That's quite a tight timescale and quite a lot of pressure. But one might think that pressure would help someone who would be able to build a better consensus than perhaps Jeremy Corbyn would. That would give the opportunity for someone to come forward.
Yeah. What's your take on that? I know you're not a great fan of Jo Swinson, and you are something of a fan of Corbyn. So what's your feeling about that?
Well, you're completely right what you're saying, Andrew. And it is a case of natural selection. It's when one sort of like abdicates responsibility, then it goes to the next one in line. And obviously, from one dispatch box to another, there is no dispatch box sitting in front of the Lib Dem benches. And Jo Swinson needs to remember, she's in danger of believing her own press. The fact that she does want to be the new Prime Minister and all the rest of it. She said so much, which is all party rhetoric when you're campaigning to be the leader of the group and whatnot, what have you. But she has to sort of like she has to draw back into reality and sort of like obviously she won't like it, but she'll just need to suck it up, Buttercup. Do you know what I mean? And the idea of Ken Clarke, the father of the house, and Harriet Harman, the mother of the house, coming together as one of complete, pie in the sky proportions, because they are, although they get on well, they've known each other for time immemorial, stuff like that, they have profound differences. So trying to coalesce around some sort of an agreement, would be, I think, fanciful to say the least. The government needs a change of direction, and even if Corbyn was put in, the country would be able to at least view that as a kind of like an insight into what may be the way ahead. So it wouldn't be so much as a new pair of fresh eyes on the situation, but it would be seen as a different approach. Now, where it falls down for me is the fact that, Corbyn again doesn't seem to accept the fact that the EU have said that they will not reopen anything to do with the Brexit negotiations. Right? This is something that I can't get my head around, is the fact that, Boris is saying that he can, he is currently working on this brand new deal, which is of no replication of Theresa May's deal that was defeated 3 times and all the rest of it. This is supposed to be a super duper new, brand new deal without anything to do with the backstop. Corbyn isn't really saying anything different when you sort of like read between the lines with him. Do you know what I mean? Yes, he's saying that he wants to be, in the freedom of movement and all the current trade thing as it is here and now, and stuff like that, and which obviously protects workers' rights, but that's a bridge too far for many of the leaving voting fraternity. So that's the fine line that he has to sort of like bridge across. Whether he can bridge across it is neither here nor there, but it's well to put it out to the public and let them decide.
On that note, we have heard a lot of talk recently about a general election.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, nobody apart from Boris Johnson particularly wants one immediately. Most of the opposition has been about saying, well, we need to get no deal on the 31st of October off the table first. And at the moment, that's still not 100% guaranteed, even though there is a law in place to require the Prime Minister to do it. So what is your feeling, Andrew, about a general election? When do you think it might happen, and what do you think might come out of it?
Well, I think that the pressure for a general election is, I think we have a pressure cooker now, in terms it's clear that we have a Prime Minister who nobody in the country voted for. We have a government that's in a significant minority, and as a result we have a Prime Minister who cannot command a majority in Parliament, and notwithstanding the Fixed Term Parliament Act, the current constitutional way out of that has to be a general election. That is the only mechanism that we have. And even if that then means that general election produces another hung Parliament, that is the mechanism that we have. And to your point, Chris, about the selection of the most fitted, the only mechanism that we have for that selection in the Constitution in the UK at the moment is repeated general elections until someone emerges who can command a real majority in the House of Commons. And so I think an early general election is an inevitability. I do not think that it is clear currently that such a general election will produce a clear majority for anyone in the House of Commons, and so the current difficulties will likely continue, albeit in a slightly different form. I don't think that the underlying problem, the division across the country that Brexit has produced, I don't think that division has been resolved yet, and so that may well drive another hung Parliament, or Parliaments plural.
Now we would then be looking at a whole new set of mandates that would exist. We can assume, I think, that the Tories would be campaigning on the basis that they intended to leave without a deal. I think at this stage that seems to be the most likely thing that they're going to say in an election, not least because the Brexit Party is breathing down their neck and have said, we'll support you provided you're committed to no deal. The SNP would presumably be campaigning on a mandate saying, on a manifesto saying, we want a referendum and that's the only thing we're asking for at Westminster. With those two parties in particular, what's your feeling about what a general election might do? Would the vote go up? Would it go down?
I think from the perspective of the SNP, I think there is the likelihood that the current crisis in Westminster will increase the SNP's vote north of the border. I think there is lots of anecdotal evidence of people who either were either unionists and or were Tory voters, that they are beginning to lose, and these are Scots voters I'm talking about, they are beginning to lose faith with the Westminster system in the circumstances of the current crisis. And so I think certainly the polling shows, if the polling is to be believed consistently, that all of the Tory MPs in Scotland would lose their place, and that there would be a significant swing back towards the previous administration in terms of a significant majority, 50 or more SNP MPs representing Scotland at Westminster.
And Chris, what's your suspicion about a general election? Do you think Labour make a triumphant return, or do the Lib Dems kind of sweep England with their bold vision of revoking Article 50 and staying in the EU?
There are 1,001 permutations that you could look at, Kenny. The two stark ones that stand out for me, with regards to Lib Dems, obviously, what happens if Jo Swinson loses her seat? Do you know what I mean? What does she do then in that situation as leading her party? More to the point, what does Willie Rennie do?
What does Willie Rennie
do? Nobody really bothers about what Willie Rennie does. But I caught, dare I say, Scottish politics on BBC One this morning. And Jackson Carlaw, unfortunately my MSP, I know, we've all got a cross to bear. He was being interviewed down in the conference down in Manchester, and I couldn't figure out what his feckin' position was. He is fully behind the whole Boris train at the moment, where he is saying, of course we have to countenance no deal, but we are going for a deal. So it's hard to decide what their manifesto would be. Do you know? It's easy to unpick the Lib Dem manifesto, which is, we are totally against Brexit, but we want to stay within the Union. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a bit ridiculous because the Union wants to come out of the EU, so that's a wee bit of an oxymoron there. The Tory one is, obviously slightly more appealing to unionists insofar as, they want to go through with Brexit come hell or high water, and obviously still remain within the Union. So that's got a wee bit more, I can see that there would be a wee bit more credibility for that from a unionist perspective. So the elephant in the room, I hate to use that analogy, but the elephant in the room is Ian Murray. Because at one point in time, he was the only Scottish Labour MP. I think it will probably go back down to that. Do you know, I don't see any of the 13 poodles surviving, just as you said. I'm a bit disappointed. I have to point out that John Nicholson is not running against Jo Swinson for the seat of East Dunbartonshire. He's decided to do Perth and Ochil. Fair play. John's a wonderful MP. He was absolutely fantastic when he was down there. And I think whoever the SNP put up against Swinson will, definitely give her a real good run for her money, because she is all over the place. And she's constantly proven time and time again that she's not really that bothered about Scotland. Do you know what I mean? She's more geared towards England, and the other thing I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, Kenny, was that it is surprising to me that she has not been parachuted into Vince Cable's seat, where, it is a safe Lib Dem seat, so that
somewhere closer to where she lives.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, but also it would allow her to carry on her role as leader of the party. So when you're looking at it like that, you are looking at the SNP returning a landslide of MPs, which is great. But even if we were to return the 59 out of 59, the Tories still wouldn't recognise the age-old statement that Margaret Thatcher came out with, is that bring a majority down here and you can get pretty much whatever you want. They'll still deny us that. Do you know what I mean? So, how it all works out is really not a major question. I'm not saying let's be complacent. Sure. I mean, I'm advertising all activists to go out and do, your 110%, which, indie activists always do. But, I think the maths have already been played out through the unionists' actions. Which has gone on since 2014. Yes. Do you know what I mean?
Well, we certainly saw success in that sense in 2017, up to and including the point where it was within an ace of Joe Swinson, of express cooperation amongst the unionist parties in terms of tactical voting in certain constituencies. Yeah. If they have got a taste for that, and I think a number of parties have got a taste for using fairly significant data on the electorate, I think we might see more of that and more targeted attempts to promote tactical voting in an effort to split or to defeat the vote for the SNP in those parties. I think Ian Murray certainly will have a difficult situation. He was elected. I think he was lucky to be elected in the first place. The SNP candidate went through some difficulties in that seat shortly before the election. I'm sure he's been a perfectly successful constituency MP in his office. There's no question of that. However, there's no great history of Edinburgh South being a Labour seat.
No.
In my lifetime, it was a Tory seat and a Labour seat, and I think the prospect of Ian Murray gathering much support from his party as well, given how offside he appears to be with the party leadership. I think he's going to struggle to mobilise money and resources.
It's interesting that you say that, because I see the seat of Edinburgh South being very much the same as East Renfrewshire. I mean, my claim to fame is the fact that I was part of the campaign team that managed to oust Jim Murphy.
Well done.
Before that, before Murphy got in, it was always a safe Tory seat.
Tory seat,
and sadly, it's we weren't successful the last time out. But that's not to say that it would be an easy sell again. But I don't think it would be hardened unionists that would come over to the idea of independence. I think it's the soft no voters that were lied to in 2014, and the one thing that we have got in our armoury now, if I could use that emotive word, is the fact that all their lies have now been debunked and they cannot go back to it.
I think you're very possibly right, although as ever, predicting just about anything in British politics right now is a mug's game. So we've probably just wasted the last 10 minutes. Anyway, moving on, for a wee bit of light relief, let's look at corruption in the highest office in the world. This is the impeachment of President Donald Trump, which the process formally began this week. There have been months and months, if not years now, of discussion about impeaching Trump for various things he's done. There was alleged collusion with Russia during the election. There was obstruction of justice during the Mueller investigation. There are countless breaches of the emoluments clause, where President Trump has enriched himself and his family through the power of the office. But this actual impeachment process seems to be focused on a conversation that Trump had with the president of Ukraine, calling on him to investigate Joe Biden, who's running in the Democratic primary, over involvement of his son Hunter Biden in a Ukrainian energy company, which, to be honest, there's a very big stink hanging over that question. I think Trump is legitimately is legitimate for Trump to ask questions about that. Perhaps not to withhold aid to Ukraine while he asks the president to do some digging. So this process has begun now. It seems very unlikely to succeed because it would require a 2/3 majority in the Senate, and the Senate is currently majority Republican, so it does seem quite unlikely that this is going to succeed. But what impact do you think impeachment will have, or the impeachment process will have?
One might think, from a historical perspective, one might think that we would see the pressure build on a president who is old and who may or may not be in the best of health. We may see the pressure build until such point as he resigns rather than is impeached, but boxing him into that corner of resignation can only happen because impeachment has started. I think we won't see the president resign until he has reached satisfactory legal agreements with the vice president who would take over, that Trump will not be held to account in the courts in the US for what he has done. I think there will be a fix applied if the history of Nixon shows us the way out of it, and I don't think we will see. Impeachment certainly is an uphill struggle, and will become a partisan distraction. But I think it does potentially signal that we're maybe moving towards the beginning of the end for Trump, insofar as he will eventually have to resign on whatever grounds. But that will not happen until he has protected himself, and to your point, protected his family from criminal and other processes in the States.
The resignation idea, I mean, as you say, that was how the impeachment process ended up with Nixon. He was never actually impeached. He resigned before it got to that stage. Do we think that Trump has enough shame to resign over anything?
Not at all. Trump again, like, well, not like Boris, because Boris is trying to be like Trump. But Trump will, as his whole persona is the fact that he is bullish enough to see it through to the bitter end, so I don't think that he would do the decent thing like Nixon, to sort of like bow down, and the whole reason he done that was because of media pressure. And media pressure in the 70s compared to media pressure now, is like night and day. But Trump is bullish enough to, see it through. And he has to do that because, first and foremost, the point that I've made time and time again is the fact that Trump is not a president. Trump is, for want of a better word, a businessman. And he has to, everything that he does at this moment in time, every stroke of the pen has got ramifications for when he leaves office, and the deals that he is setting up, and what have you. The fact that when you've got, I mean, Biden's pretty much a capitalist as well. Do you know what I mean?
Very, very much so.
Yeah. So when you've got two capitalists fighting in the room, there's only going to be one survivor. And again, I go back to what I said earlier on about the natural selection. I don't think that Biden's got enough to go up against Trump, because I think Trump is too big a character in order to even let an impeachment bother him.
I would agree. I think the one aspect isn't thinking of Trump's business background in particular. This is someone who has not been ashamed or troubled at all by the financial collapse of 4 casinos, a steaks business, an airline, a vodka business. He has no difficulty in seizing victory from defeat, and a resignation where he is not prosecuted and gets away, if I can speak in those terms, gets away with it. I think that he would see that as a success, And also, I think in terms of some of those who played a great part in Trump's younger life, I'm thinking in particular of the attorney Michael Cohen, Ray Cohen, who represented both Trump's father and Trump. I think Cohen's approach, as I understand it, in terms of fighting and never admitting defeat, even when it's clearly a defeat, I think that may still inform Trump's reactions. And certainly, as I say, in terms of claiming success where you've managed to lose money running a casino, I think that might still, if Trump believes that a resignation is a success because he is protected and he gets away with it figuratively, I think that might appeal to him ultimately.
The one other thing that I need to point out, and I think your analysis is absolutely spot on. We have to draw the similarities again between Trump and Johnson, because you're citing characters on Trump's side, and quite clearly we've got a character on Boris's side who is pretty much controlling the strings of the puppet, and everything that Boris does is staged in such a way. And honestly, it is like looking in a mirror glass. When you see what Trump has done with the last 4 years, things have been sort of like ramping up, and they've started to get manifestly more bizarre as each unfolding day plays out. You look at what's happened in Britain in the last 4 years, and I personally think during May's tenure, I think it was always an inevitability that Boris was going to get in. But in order for Boris to get in, again, although he comes across as the bumbling fool and whatnot and what have you, he still needs somebody to give him a sense of direction. And that sense of direction is replicated in Cummings.
I think Cummings and 8.3 billion pounds that's been invested shocking the pound. That's a huge impetus behind the Prime Minister.
But the other thing again is that we see this week that Trump has unveiled more plans to expand another golf course up in Aberdeenshire, along with 550 odd private residences. And apparently that pretty much got passed with a clear majority, which is a bit bizarre to say the least. You've then got Boris talking about the things that he's going to do in government, but is equally trying to shuffle under the carpet the whole deal with the American businesswomen and all the rest of it. So when you clearly identify those two characters as not being statespeople, but they are business people, that is pretty much the way. Look at Russia, and you're trying to tell me that Putin hasn't got his finger in the pie, and do you know what I mean? It is capitalist corruption, and it is played out throughout the world.
Anyway, moving on, we do have a fairly big event happening next weekend, Andrew.
Yes, indeed.
We have the All Under One Banner March happening in Edinburgh. Would you like to just tell us a wee bit about what's happening and what you're expecting?
Next Saturday, the 5th of October, the All Under One Banner organisation hopes to see the climax or the peak of a succession of marches that have been held in towns and cities across Scotland this year. I became involved in the organisation at the Edinburgh March last year, and I found it such a positive and inclusive and constructive and fun event that I decided to help support that organisation. And so this year, whilst the plans for next year are now set out, and there are 7 marches that are now in the process of being arranged for 2020, everyone involved would like to see the march in Edinburgh next weekend as being the peak of this year's succession of marches. We are certainly hopeful of seeing we're seeing more than 200,000 people marching together, literally all under one banner. The point in the organisation is that it is non-political. It is open for anybody and everybody and their dogs to come and walk and march and make their feelings with regard to independence known. The march will start at Holyrood Park at 1 o'clock sharp. The march will then march up the Royal Mile, along George IV Bridge, along Forest Road, Middle Meadow Walk, and then we'll come to a conclusion with a rally in the Meadows on the south side of Edinburgh. I should say that because the march is regulated by the City of Edinburgh Council, the arrangements and the plans are always subject to the control of the Council. However, as the matters are planned at the moment, as I've said, we'll depart from Holyrood Park at 1 o'clock sharp, and we'll march up the Royal Mile and towards the Meadows. As I say, I found the march last year incredibly positive and incredibly inclusive, and that encouraged me to stay involved. And I have certainly found that, in my opinion, others who have been involved, I think it's been obvious that people keep coming back again and again, and because they enjoy the event so much, because it is so inclusive, so positive, and it is such a constructive movement. I think at the time where we see occasionally political movements that may be described as being slightly darker, I think in sharp contrast, the movement that is represented by All Under One Banner is the diametric opposite to that. All ages, all backgrounds, inclusive of everyone, and as all of the press coverage, such as there has been, will show, you see all of the smiling, happy faces. You see how much fun people are having at these events, both on the marches and at the rallies. So I'm looking forward to next weekend tremendously.
Great. Now, I'm sure you know, Broadcasting Scotland has been at most, if not all, of the marches that have happened this year, and you're right. It has been huge turnouts, generally speaking. They all look really positive. Everyone we've spoken to is really engaged. What kind of impact do you think these marches have on the wider public and on the actual political case for independence?
I think it's important that the All Under One Banner movement is whilst it is national, it represents locally, and so in particular I enjoyed the marches in Oban and in Campbellton this year, and I'm looking forward to Arbroath and Peebles and Elgin next year. So these are events which take place across the country, and I think because they're happening in close to people's homes, they see that the movement and the organising and everything that All Under One Banner represents is included. It makes, by definition, it makes the movement very visible, but it shows that it's peaceful. In contrast to some other political movements, as I say, it shows that the movement is growing and is growing from the grassroots. Because this is non-party political, it is by definition almost and it certainly, you can see very clearly, it's a grassroots organisation, but it shows that creativity and equality and a positive approach to marching in this way underlines the fact that in my view, it's perfectly natural for people to seek self-determination, and when they do that in a peaceful, constructive, positive way, then they are likely to be successful.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think these marches are like for other people who aren't participating? We often hear from unionists, particularly people who probably haven't thought of anything else to write in their column that week, that flags are intimidating, and big parades are bothersome to normal people, and this is the preserve of a crazed minority. What do you think? Do you think that's true at all?
No, I don't. I think from my own experience, and it's my experience, those who participate in the All Under One Banner marches are not the crazed, or they're not the fringe of anything. In my experience, they are people from the ages of 9 to 99, from all backgrounds, of all types, colours, creeds, and all sorts of dogs as well. There
are a lot of dogs, aren't there?
And that there is I agree that the visuals are very important. The photographs of the marches in Glasgow and Perth, and in particular Edinburgh last year, are very striking visual images which convey a very strong positive message. I think the obsession with flags makes me smile sometimes, because it seems quite partisan. If it's a red, white and blue flag, then it's fine. If it's not, then it's a problem, and that doesn't make any logical sense to me. But I think certainly, and again in my experience, we have seen more and more people joining these marches on the street. They all are standing on the pavements, either applauding or waving flags, so not necessarily marching, but being supportive. There is definitely more of that taking place, and so I think as people see more and more of these marches, people are becoming more positive towards them, because they understand that they are inclusive and creative and constructive and peaceful, and it's not about confrontation.
And Chris, as a veteran socialist, I'm quite sure you have been on your share of marches in your time, your share of public protests and all that kind of thing. How do you feel about the march, the All Under One Banner marches?
I obviously, yeah, I love them. I think they're so invigorating, and it's worth pointing out as well that these unionists that it's okay to carry a Union Jack and stuff like that and all the rest of it. It's the whole English-Scottish thing. But when you look at the All Under One Banner marches, it's not just saltire.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? There are some people who are quite happy to carry the Royal Standard, the Lion Rampant. There's Catalonian flags. There's
St George's crosses.
St George's crosses. There's Yes Cymru, and we've got Germans for India as well, and so I mean it is. That replicates the inclusivity of it, as well as the people who are not able to walk, because quite rightly the people who are using mobility scooters are up front, and they're allowed to go and if they want to go all together, or they politely just go at their own pace because they're chatting to the pal and or holding somebody's dug.
Yes.
But I mean, I would like to see it go a wee bit further. You know what I mean? And cats for Indy and rabbits and koalas and stuff like that.
If you can get cats to march in a straight line.
My sister-in-law, my ex-sister-in-law lives in Sweden, and she had I could never find this variety, but her cat was a Swedish farmyard cat.
Okay.
I don't know if that's an actual breed, but she used to take it on a leash.
Really?
Do you know what I mean? And apparently that's what people in Sweden do.
Well, we'll have to look into what Sweden is doing with their cats on another episode. Just very quickly before we go, do we have any names confirmed for speaking at the rally that people can look forward to?
As I understand it, from the conversations I've heard, certainly Joe Cherry QC is confirmed to speak.
Excellent.
I haven't heard of any of the other speakers yet. I've not been paying closer attention to that side of the organisation.
Is Tommy Shepherd speaking?
If the Edinburgh March last year is anything to go by, I would expect we will see a number of Edinburgh MSPs and MPs participating.
And I'm being told in my ear that we suspect Hardeep Singh Kohli is going to speak as well.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think I saw a confirmation for him. So the rallies are all, I think there will be 4 bands, plus the Sir Alba Pipe Band, and a number of speakers taking part at the rally, which is at the conclusion of the march, which will be in the Meadows. And
I'm being told Janie Godley is the other co-host of the thing, so we will see her as well. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time now, so thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for joining us. It's been an interesting conversation, and I've learned something about Swedish cats, so that's always a win for the episode as far as I'm concerned. So again, thank you very much for joining us. As you know, we tell you this every time, but making TV programmes is an expensive business. So if you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland, Please do go to this address that you can see at the bottom of the screen, become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter at broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up to give your £5 a month. We do, as I said earlier, we do cover all of these all under one banner marches. We will be at the march next week. And we also, if we can get these 300 new subscribers that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks, we are ready to go with our new Scottish Question Time show that we want to take around the country to get answers from politicians and other useful people. So if you are able, do please support us. If not, don't worry, the shows will always be free to view online. That's the Broadcasting Scotland promise. But in the meantime, all it remains for me to say is to thank Andrew, thanks Chris for being here, thank you for joining us. My name's Kenny McBride, and we will see you again next week on The Full Scottish.